Well, it's multifaceted. It kind of depends on the context of, personal regret of the person who passes, or even the regret we feel when someone passes.
He was celebrated as a rare spiritual bridge, a young medium who seemed able to see and sense what others never could. People looked at him with awe, admiration, and hope, believing he possessed a gift that made him stronger, calmer, and more enlightened than the rest of the world. But behind the comforting messages, the emotional readings, and the calm smile, was a young man quietly falling apart. His life wasn't just about giving others closure. It was about surviving the emotional, physical, and spiritual backlash that came with every connection he made. His journey forces us to ask, what happens to someone who carries the grief of thousands? How does a young medium survive the loneliness of knowing things before they happen? And can a gift that brings hope to millions also destroy the person who holds it? This is the unseen, heartbreaking, and brutally honest story of a young man whose spiritual abilities shaped every corner of his life, in ways the world still doesn't understand. He didn't grow up dreaming of being a medium. He didn't study spirituality, didn't read mystical books, and didn't come from a long line of psychic ancestors. His ability appeared suddenly, and violently. Around the age of 9, he began experiencing strange flashes. Not visions. Not voices. Just an overwhelming sense that something was about to happen. At first, he thought everyone felt this. Children often interpret the extraordinary as ordinary. But his first undeniable experience came when he sensed a tragedy long before it unfolded. He knew someone close to his family was going to pass away. He didn't understand why he felt it, only that the feeling wouldn't go away. When the news reached his home, he didn't feel shock. He felt guilt, confusion, fear, and something deeper, almost like responsibility. That moment didn't make him feel chosen. It made him feel broken. As he grew older, these sensations didn't fade, they intensified. He began sensing emotions that weren't his. He felt heaviness in rooms where no one else felt anything at all. He picked up messages that sounded like whispers but came from nowhere physical. There was no instruction manual. No mentor. No comforting figure who understood. The awakening wasn't mystical or magical, it was disorienting, unwanted, and lonely. And while other kids were enjoying the carefree innocence of childhood, he was learning how to navigate a world where emotions, spirits, and unknown energies followed him everywhere. His gift didn't give him clarity. It took away his childhood long before he understood what childhood should feel like. Growing up in a conservative California town, he quickly learned that being different wasn't acceptable, especially when it came to anything spiritual. His classmates whispered about him. Some called him strange. Some called him evil. And others avoided him entirely. Rumors spread faster than the truth ever could. Parents told their children not to spend time with him. Teachers treated him like a distraction rather than a student struggling with something unseen. And people at church warned his family that spiritual sensitivity came from dark places. He became a ghost long before he ever spoke to one. Middle school was the darkest time. He struggled to fit into the expectations of others while dealing with feelings and sensations he never asked for. Nobody believed him, which in some ways, he wished they did. Because disbelief meant isolation. But belief might have meant fear. High school offered no relief. By then, the whispers had grown sharper, and the accusations more personal. He wasn't just weird anymore, he was dangerous. The shame, the rejection, the loneliness all began to mold his identity in ways he wouldn't understand until adulthood. He tried to suppress his abilities, force them down, ignore them, but the harder he pushed them away, the stronger they became. His community shaped the emotional scars that would later influence every part of his life, his relationships, his career, his self-worth. Years later, when thousands would applaud his abilities, he would still remember the silence of empty cafeterias, the sting of judgmental glances, and the crushing loneliness of being misunderstood. The world saw a confident medium. But beneath it all was a boy still carrying the trauma of a childhood spent on the outside looking in. Long before fame, long before cameras, long before anyone asked him for a reading, his body was fighting its own war. Born prematurely, he entered the world already fragile. Doctors warned his family of complications, risks, and developmental challenges. But no one predicted how deeply his health would shape his future. By his late teens, serious symptoms began to appear. Head pressure, seizure-like episodes, blackouts, intense headaches that left him unable to move. For a long time, he tried to hide these episodes from his family, thinking they were somehow related to his psychic abilities. But everything changed when he collapsed at home, unable to speak. Doctors quickly discovered the truth: a dangerous brain cyst blocking spinal fluid, causing extreme pressure inside his skull. Emergency surgery became unavoidable. He survived, but barely. And recovery left him with new fears. Was his gift tied to his brain? Would surgery change who he was? Would he lose everything that made him, him? But the health crises didn't stop there. He later developed severe respiratory problems that left him coughing blood, gasping for air, and unable to speak for days. Doctors suspected lung collapse, viral complications, and long-term damage. He lived with the terrifying realization that his life could end at any moment, not from spirits, not from skeptics, but from his own fragile body. And yet, he continued helping others find closure, even when his own body was barely holding on. His health struggles create a truth few understand: the man people believe to be spiritually strong is physically vulnerable in ways the world cannot see. When he was finally discovered and introduced to the world as a talented medium, his life transformed overnight. Viewers saw him as calm, collected, compassionate. He brought comfort to grieving families. He reassured celebrities. He spoke softly, listened deeply, and delivered messages that left people in tears. But fame brought something else too. Relentless skepticism. Articles questioned his authenticity. Podcasts mocked him. Reddit threads called him a scam. Critics claimed he memorized information, researched clients, or manipulated vulnerable people. He became the center of debates he never wanted to participate in. And while he expected some disbelief, he never anticipated the aggression that came with it. People questioned his character, his morality, his intelligence, not just his gift. And for someone who grew up fighting to feel accepted, the public criticism cut deeper than he admitted. Yet, he never lashed out. Never attacked back. Never engaged in hostility. Instead, he accepted skepticism as part of his path, saying disbelief was healthy, a sign that people were thinking critically. But privately, he carried the emotional bruises. He knew that every time he stepped on stage, every time he filmed a reading, every time he posted online, thousands were waiting to tear him apart. He lived between praise and ridicule, admiration and hate, belief and doubt. And that emotional pressure became another burden stacked onto the ones he already carried. People assume that mediums are unaffected by death, that because they sense it, predict it, or communicate with it, they somehow become immune to grief. But nothing could be further from the truth. One of the deepest emotional wounds he carries is the loss of someone he loved, a friend who meant everything to him. They connected deeply. Understood each other effortlessly. Shared fears, secrets, and dreams. And for the first time in his life, he felt seen. But then he sensed something, a heaviness, a shift, a message he didn't want to believe. His friend was dying. And instead of drawing close, he pulled away. Not because he didn't care, but because caring felt unbearable when he already knew the ending. When his friend passed, the guilt consumed him. He blamed himself for withdrawing. For not being present. For running from the pain he felt too early. This loss taught him that his gift wasn't just emotionally exhausting, it was emotionally devastating. He felt grief long before events happened. He felt endings before they began. He lived in a world where every goodbye came twice, once when he sensed it, and once when it finally happened. This kind of emotional burden would break anyone. But for him, it became an unspoken part of his identity. A silent ache he carried everywhere he went. People think mediums can shut off their gift. Flip a switch. Take a break. But that isn't how it works. For him, the spiritual world is like background noise, quiet at times, loud at others, but never completely silent. So he developed coping strategies. Small mental compartments where he placed emotions that weren't his. Boundaries he built to protect himself. Rituals that helped him maintain control when the emotional weight grew too heavy. But even with those tools, the toll was undeniable. He dealt with exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. Anxiety that didn't come from his own life. Sadness he absorbed from others. Nightmares filled with fragments of readings he couldn't forget. His personal relationships suffered too. How do you date when you sense someone's unresolved grief? How do you maintain friendships when emotional overload is constant? How do you live in peace when every room you walk into carries its own history? Still, he kept going. Not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely wanted to help people heal. His empathy runs deeper than most. And that empathy is both his gift and his curse. Today, he continues to share his abilities with the world. He reads for people from all walks of life. He travels, speaks, educates, and heals. But the world still doesn't truly know him. They see the psychic. They see the celebrity. They see the calm, gentle young man guiding others. But they don't see the panic attacks, the private tears, the surgeries, the judgment, the losses, the exhaustion, the fear of disappointing those he tries to help. His story is not about supernatural power, it's about human resilience. It's about a young man who faced rejection, illness, heartbreak, and skepticism, and still chose to use his gift for good. He is living proof that behind every public figure is a private battle. Behind every medium is a human being trying to navigate pain the world never sees. Behind every gift is a cost few could ever understand. And yet, through all of it, he remains committed to helping others move forward, even when he is still learning how to heal himself. His journey reminds us that extraordinary abilities come with extraordinary burdens, and that the strongest people are often the ones who endure the most unseen pain. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep, emotional stories that go beyond the surface. For years, Melissa Gilbert carried a fear that most people never knew about. Even though she had grown up in the public eye, she was terrified of exposing the real tension that existed between her and Patty Duke. Hollywood had trained her to stay silent, to protect reputations, and to pretend everything was fine, even when it wasn't. Melissa admitted that Patty Duke's sudden outbursts, unpredictable mood shifts, and intense criticism left her emotionally shaken many times. But since Patty Duke was a respected Hollywood figure, Melissa feared that speaking up would make her look ungrateful or dramatic. But deep down, Melissa knew she couldn't carry the emotional weight forever. Silence had protected others, but it had never protected her. A surprising twist came years later when Melissa discovered something she never expected. Patty Duke wasn't intentionally being cruel, she was fighting her own internal battles. Melissa learned about Patty's long struggle with mental health, bipolar disorder, and emotional trauma from her early career. Suddenly, everything clicked. The harsh behavior, the anger, the unpredictability, it all had a hidden explanation. This realization didn't erase the pain Melissa had gone through, but it opened her eyes to a deeper truth. Patty wasn't a villain, she was a wounded person trying to survive in an industry that gave her fame but took away her peace. For the first time, Melissa felt empathy instead of anger. She understood that both of them were victims of Hollywood's pressure, expectations, and emotional neglect. This shift in perspective allowed Melissa to finally heal, something she had struggled with for years. For decades, Melissa kept everything inside, every hurtful memory, every emotional wound, every moment when she felt overshadowed or mistreated. But as she grew older, something changed. Melissa realized that silence wasn't strength, silence was slowly breaking her from the inside. She reached a point where she no longer cared about Hollywood's opinions or the backlash she might face. What mattered most was healing. What mattered was honesty. And so, for the first time, she allowed herself to speak freely about Patty Duke, the good, the bad, and the painful. Sharing her truth didn't just liberate her. It reminded thousands of fans that even celebrities carry scars no one sees. Melissa expected criticism, disbelief, maybe even anger. But the moment her story came out, it went viral. Fans weren't angry at her. They weren't judgmental. Instead, they were emotional, supportive, and overwhelmingly understanding. People praised her bravery. Others thanked her for shedding light on the hidden emotional battles that happened behind closed doors. For the first time in years, Melissa felt seen, not as a child star, not as Laura from Little House, but as a human being who had survived more than she ever admitted. This wave of support gave Melissa the confidence she had been missing for decades. Despite all the emotional wounds, Melissa never wanted to destroy Patty Duke's name. In fact, she made it clear that Patty was one of Hollywood's most talented and misunderstood performers. Melissa openly said that Patty's brilliance and her struggles were deeply connected. She couldn't ignore the pain, but she also couldn't erase the admiration she had for Patty's work. This honest approach changed everything. Instead of creating drama, Melissa inspired a mature, meaningful conversation about. Melissa didn't just tell a story, she opened a dialogue Hollywood had avoided for years. By facing the truth and sharing her memories, Melissa experienced something she thought she would never feel: true emotional freedom. The heaviness lifted. The resentment faded. The confusion made sense. It was as if speaking the truth finally brought closure to a chapter that had haunted her since childhood. For the first time, she felt peace with her past, and even peace with Patty Duke's memory. Melissa realized that healing doesn't always come from forgetting. Sometimes it comes from finally saying what should have been said years ago. What many people never understood was that Melissa and Patty's tension didn't grow in isolation. Hollywood itself played a major role. Every scene had to be perfect. Every emotion had to be precise. Every mistake was magnified. Patty Duke, already dealing with her own emotional struggles, often transferred that pressure onto Melissa. And Melissa, being younger, absorbed it all silently. The environment was competitive, demanding, and emotionally draining. Hollywood didn't just create stars, it created distances, misunderstandings, and silent pain that both women carried for years. While fans loved Melissa for her warmth on screen, they had no idea what she was facing when the cameras stopped rolling. She often cried alone in her trailer. She questioned her self-worth. She wondered why Patty, someone she admired, was so harsh toward her. Melissa kept these struggles hidden because she didn't want to be seen as difficult. As a child star, she thought the only way to survive was to stay quiet and keep smiling, even when her heart was breaking. This emotional burden shaped her entire career. Some memories faded with time, but a few moments stayed etched in Melissa's mind forever, moments when Patty's anger struck out of nowhere, or when Melissa felt completely alone despite being surrounded by cameras and crew. These weren't dramatic scenes. They were small, quiet moments: a harsh word, a cold stare, an unexpected outburst. Melissa never hated Patty, but these unspoken memories haunted her for years, shaping the way she trusted people, reacted to stress, and viewed the world around her. Forgiveness wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. And it wasn't simple. Melissa eventually realized that forgiveness didn't mean erasing the past or pretending everything was fine. Instead, it meant allowing herself to move forward without bitterness. She accepted that Patty was human, flawed, brilliant, hurting, and complicated. Melissa chose understanding over anger, growth over resentment, and peace over conflict. This decision didn't change the past, but it changed her future. The emotional wounds Melissa carried from her childhood shaped her relationships, decisions, and sense of self-worth as an adult. She often found herself overly cautious, afraid of confrontation, and hesitant to trust people completely. But the older she grew, the more she realized that these patterns weren't flaws, they were survival mechanisms she had developed as a child. By acknowledging this, Melissa finally began breaking free from emotional chains she didn't even know she had. People asked Melissa, "Why now? Why speak after all these years?" The answer was simple: she had nothing left to hide and everything left to heal. At 61, she no longer feared judgment. She wanted to help others understand the emotional complexity behind relationships, fame, and mental health. Speaking the truth wasn't just for her, it was for anyone who had ever stayed silent to protect someone else at the cost of their own peace. After Melissa shared her truth, something unexpected happened. People from around the world began opening up about their own painful experiences. Fans, former child actors, even crew members from different sets wrote to her, saying her honesty gave them the courage to confront memories they had buried for years. Melissa realized that her story wasn't just hers anymore, it had become a voice for countless people who had stayed silent out of fear. Her truth became a bridge that allowed others to finally express their hidden wounds. This impact touched Melissa deeply and gave even more meaning to her decision. Despite everything, the emotional scars, the misunderstandings, and the hurt, Melissa never lost the complicated affection she had for Patty Duke. She remembered the good moments too, the guidance, the laughter, the shared scenes, the lessons she didn't appreciate at the time. Melissa understood now that two truths can exist together: Patty hurt her, and Patty helped shape her career. This wasn't a story of hate, it was a story of two women bound by talent, pain, and a world that demanded too much from both of them. Melissa's feelings toward Patty remained layered, emotional, and deeply human. As Melissa looked back at her journey, she realized something powerful: healing doesn't come from pretending the past was perfect. Healing comes from telling the truth, even when it's messy, uncomfortable, or painful. She hoped that her honesty would inspire others to face their own stories with courage, because healing doesn't start with forgetting. It starts with finally being brave enough to remember.